You cannot heal where you were hurt. You cannot grow where you were diminished. You cannot thrive in the soil poisoned by betrayal, by neglect, by manipulation. Healing is not just a matter of willpower, it is a matter of environment. The wounds you carry are not isolated accidents. They were forged by patterns. Patterns of dismissal, patterns of gaslighting, patterns of being unseen, unheard, unvalued. And if you remain loyal to those patterns, if you stay bound to the environments that taught you to distrust your own voice, to shrink your own presence, to negotiate your own worth, you will find yourself trapped in an endless loop. Healing, reopening, healing, reopening. A cycle with no true escape. Because healing is not just about processing the pain, it is about refusing to relive it. It is about stepping away from the silent agreements that kept you small. It is about breaking the unspoken contracts that required your betrayal of self in exchange for belonging. And that distance you must create. It's not always physical. It's not always about moving to a new city, cutting off all ties, disappearing into a new life. It's psychological. It's emotional. It's energetic. You could be continents away and still replay the old dynamics in your mind. Still shrink in new rooms. Still apologize for existing. Still betray your instincts for the comfort of others. True healing demands a deeper exodus. It demands noticing the subtle betrayals you commit against yourself daily. The moments you stay silent when your soul begs you to speak. The moments you smile to hide your grief. The moments you sacrifice authenticity for approval. And healing demands brutal honesty. It demands that you ask yourself questions most are too afraid to face. Who benefits from me staying broken? Whose comfort am I protecting at the cost of my own? Whose story am I still living? And why? Because no matter how many books you read, how many affirmations you recite, how many insights you gather, if you keep watering the roots of your old pain, you will never taste the fruits of your true becoming. At some point, healing demands more than reflection. It demands revolution, not a loud, vengeful rebellion, but a quiet, defiant act of love. Love for the self you are becoming. Love for the life that still waits for you beyond the ruins. Love for the future that cannot be built on the broken scaffolding of the past. You do not heal by proving your loyalty to the places that wounded you. You heal by walking away. You heal by choosing yourself. You heal by daring to believe that you are worthy of more. Not someday, not when you're better, not when you've earned it, but now. Right now. Leaving the environment that broke you is not an act of weakness. It is an act of wisdom. It is not a tantrum. It is not betrayal. It is clarity. Clarity that no amount of self-love can survive in the shadow of old pain. Clarity that you cannot heal in the same place that taught you to abandon yourself. You can do the inner work. You can journal, meditate, forgive, and reflect. But if your external world still echoes the wounds you are trying to heal, you are planting flowers in poisoned soil. You may bloom for a while, but eventually, the roots will rot. Leaving is not running away. It is choosing to stop bleeding for someone else's comfort. It is daring to break the ancestral pattern of suffering in silence. It is the act of saying, "Wait, this ends with me." And yes, it will hurt. Not just because of what you're leaving, but because of who you thought you had to be in order to survive it. You will feel guilt. Guilt for outgrowing your history. Guilt for choosing peace over loyalty. Guilt for walking away when others stayed behind. But guilt is not a sign of wrongness. It is a sign of programming. It is the residue of a system that taught you your role was to stay quiet, stay small, stay useful. And when you break that role, when you stop performing the version of yourself they preferred, you threaten the illusion. You expose the dysfunction. You force everyone around you to confront their own comfort with your suffering. That's why they call you selfish. That's why they say you've changed. That's why they try to pull you back. Not because they love you unconditionally, but because your growth unsettles their comfort. But healing was never about being liked. It was about being whole. And to be whole, you must leave behind what fragments you. You must walk away from the systems, the cycles, the relationships that only loved your compliance, not your truth. This is the part no one talks about, the loneliness, the disorientation, the strange ache of shedding identities that once protected you. You will question yourself. You will wonder if it was really that bad. You will feel the urge to go back. Not because it was right, but because it was familiar. But the pain of growth is the cost of freedom. Because when you leave what broke you, you don't just liberate yourself. You become proof that it's possible. You become a lighthouse for others lost in the same fog. And yes, it's lonely. But the ones who are meant for the healed version of you, they will find you. Not in your silence, but in your rising. Healing demands boundaries, not soft suggestions, not hopeful expectations, boundaries that are firm, unapologetic, sacred. Because the environments that broke you will not celebrate your healing, they will challenge it. Not always directly, sometimes through guilt, sometimes through silence. Sometimes through that subtle shift in energy that tells you you're no longer playing your part. Your growth disrupts the unspoken contract that you would stay small, that you would stay agreeable, that you would stay hurt, because your pain kept the balance, your peace, your clarity, your refusal to regress. All of it becomes a mirror they didn't ask for. A mirror they may not be ready to face, and so they push back. They call you cold. They call you distant. They say you've changed, as if that's a crime. They mistake your boundaries for arrogance, your clarity for cruelty, your healing for betrayal. But you're not betraying them. You're betraying the version of you that was never whole, and that betrayal is necessary. That betrayal is sacred, because healing is not just self-care. It's self-liberation. It's refusing to pass down what nearly destroyed you. It's choosing truth over comfort, wholeness over familiarity, freedom over approval. And that means protecting your energy, like your life depends on it, because it does. Your life, the real one, the one that was buried under roles and rules and survival strategies, depends on your ability to say no. No to conversations that drain you. No to dynamics that confuse you. No to guilt masquerading as love. And yes, this will be lonely. Not because you're wrong, but because you're breaking a pattern. And pattern breaking always feels like betrayal to those still inside the pattern. But here's the truth. Loneliness in integrity is lighter than connection in self-betrayal. And one day, that loneliness will give way to something deeper: alignment, peace, belonging, not the kind you earn by shrinking, but the kind you find by expanding. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not arrogant for walking away. You are not cruel for honoring your becoming. You are doing the sacred work, the work of healing. the work of choosing a different future, the work of becoming someone who can love without losing themselves. And that work is worth every boundary, every silence, every misunderstood step. Because standing alone in your truth will always be better than drowning quietly in someone else's illusion. Healing requires grief, not surface sadness, not polite acceptance, but deep, aching, soul-level grief. Grief for the places that couldn't hold you. Grief for the people who saw your pain and turned away. Grief for the silence that met your screams. Because healing is not just about growth. It is about release. It is about letting go of the fantasy that things could have been different. It is about facing the heartbreak of all the times they weren't. This grief is not weakness. It is not indulgence. It is necessary, because until you allow yourself to mourn what you lost, you carry it. You carry it in your body, your choices, your tone of voice, your relationships. You carry it in your fears of abandonment, in your hunger for approval, in the ways you disappear to keep the peace. And that weight is not sustainable. Not if you want to heal. Not if you want to be free. Grief breaks you open. It disrupts the lies you told yourself just to keep going. It forces you to admit that something sacred was violated, that something tender inside you was bruised and never acknowledged, and that acknowledgement is not regression, it's resurrection. You must feel it. You must let the sobs shake your chest. Let the rage rise. Let the numbness melt. You must stop sanitizing your pain to protect the comfort of others. Because the environments that broke you will always try to erase the evidence. They will downplay. They will dismiss. They will whisper. Was it really that bad? Maybe you're too sensitive. Can't you just move on? But healing demands honesty, and honesty demands grief. Not performative, not curated, raw, real, relentless. The grief that says, that hurt. I mattered. I shouldn't have had to survive that. And only when you give that grief room to move through you, only when you stop resisting its presence, can something new begin to grow. Grief makes space. It clears the debris. It washes away the numbness so truth can breathe again. It is not the end of healing. It is the beginning of something deeper. The reclamation of your own voice, your own worth, your own humanity. Grief is the fire that clears the forest, not to destroy, but to make way for a new kind of growth. The kind rooted not in denial, but in truth. Because real healing doesn't ask you to forget. It asks you to remember fully, honestly, and then finally, to let go. Healing is not just about walking away. It's about walking toward something unfamiliar, toward something fragile, toward something that doesn't yet exist, because you are in the process of building it. Leaving the environment that broke you is a powerful beginning. But the real transformation begins after the escape, when there are no more villains to blame, no more patterns to fight against. Only the quiet, unnerving work of choosing something different. And choosing different isn't easy, because the wounds don't disappear with distance. They speak in whispers, in habits, in fears. You don't deserve safety. Don't get too close. This won't last. They make you flinch at kindness. They make you doubt stability. They make you sabotage what you've prayed for, because pain, at least, is predictable. And in those moments, the temptation is real, to go back, to settle, to fold yourself into something smaller and call it home. But healing is the daily defiance of that temptation. It's the choice to sit in the discomfort, to stay with the slowness, to breathe through the awkwardness of being seen, known, loved without a mask. Because healing isn't about finding the perfect person or the perfect place. It's about becoming the person who refuses to abandon themselves ever again. It's about becoming the place where your own heart is safe, where your needs are not too much, where your pain is not a burden, where your softness is not a liability, but a language. And that takes practice. You'll stumble, you'll regress, you'll forget that you are allowed to start over. But each time you choose not to run, each time you breathe instead of bolt, each time you speak the truth even when your voice shakes, you are healing. You are rewriting the code. You are planting seeds in soil you never thought could grow anything. You are becoming the environment you always needed. And yes, it will be slow. It will be invisible to the world for a long time. But eventually, something will shift. You'll stop waiting for love to be earned. You'll stop fearing peace. You'll stop mistaking chaos for passion. And in that stillness, in that groundedness, you'll realize you did not just survive. You rebuilt. You made a home inside yourself that no one can evict you from. This is the quiet revolution. Not just leaving what broke you, but creating what holds you. A life that honors the self you are still bravely becoming. Healing is not just about escape. It's not just about survival. It's about becoming someone you were never allowed to be. It's about choosing a life where you are not edited, where your light doesn't threaten, where your truth doesn't cost you love. It's about remembering that you were never broken, only bent around people who couldn't hold your wholeness. But real healing is not poetic. It is raw. It is cyclical. It is exhausting. Because every day the temptation returns to make yourself small, to be loved, to hide your truth, to avoid tension, to trade authenticity for approval. And some days, you might fall for it. You might feel the pull to shrink, to conform, to perform. But each time you catch yourself, each time you return, you reclaim something sacred, your loyalty to yourself. That loyalty is the foundation of your healing. And from that foundation, something begins to grow. A deeper capacity to recognize what you never had the language for. That love, when offered only in exchange for compliance, is not love, it's control, dressed in affection, it's silence, dressed in safety. You begin to see clearly that many of the places you called home were war zones. Many of the people you called family were the architects of your self-abandonment. And many of the things you called love were simply comfort built on suppression. And it is here, right here, that the next chapter of healing begins. The chapter where you redefine love itself, where you no longer settle for proximity without presence, where you no longer call conditional tolerance belonging, where you dare to imagine a new kind of intimacy, one where your truth is safe, not punished. Because to truly heal, you must unlearn the idea that being accepted requires you to disappear. And as this deeper healing unfolds, it leads you into unfamiliar territory. Territory where the very structure of love, connection, and identity begins to crack, where you're not just asking how to feel whole, but who you are when no one is watching. When you are not performing. When you are not chasing anyone's approval. And that's where we go next. In the next video, we'll unravel a quiet epidemic of our time, The Death of Authenticity will explore how social conditioning, overstimulation, and digital performance have fractured our sense of self, and what it takes to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. But for now, let me leave you with one final question. Have you been calling something love that only ever loved your silence?